I am so excited to have someone that I hold near and I revere and I hold him very near to my heart. This guy was the center on our undefeated 88 11-0 football team at WVU. One of the nicest individuals you ever want to meet in your life. Never changed. All these years later, I call this guy my Mountaineer brother, as I do with most of my teammates. But it started with the man in the middle, the center, Kevin Koken. So I have him on my show, Relatively Sports with Eugene, Napoleon, and I am blessed and honored to have him. So without further ado, here's my guy, the man in the middle, Kevin Koken. My main man and teammate, Kevin Koken. What's going on with you, brother?
Eugene, I'm living the dream right now, man. All is good, all is great right here. How about you?
Man, listen, if I complain, God needs to slap me in the back of the head. So I cannot complain. I won't complain. Listen, man, this is, first off, I'm humbled and honored and appreciative that you took the time to jump on my show, brother. I really am. It means a lot. You don't understand how much this means to me.
Oh, well, I could bring that back this way too. You know, there's a million people you could interview, and you called me out, so that's greatly appreciated.
Listen, but there's only one man in the middle. Okay. There's
sure.
only one center. And see, here's what people don't understand, right? So everybody knows about that magical 88 team, and everybody knows about the season and playing for the national championship. Here's what's funny. What people don't know is everything started and would end with you, because you were the starting center, my friend. So
sort of, yeah. There are times I make it, Eugene, I make it clear to everybody, Major Harris was nothing until I handed him the ball.
Listen, okay, let me tell you something, and I'm gonna go ahead and echo that. We couldn't do nothing unless you got that man the ball.
Very true.
All jokes aside, Kevin, man, it was always an honor to play with you because of the kind of person you was then, and it echoes as to the man that you are now, and that's why it was so imperative and important for me to get you on my show, because this isn't a hype program. This is a program that really is informative, and I want to take a quick stroll back down memory lane. What was it like? First off, what brought you to Morgantown, West Virginia, into WVU in the first place?
So it's a great question, and you know, I've been asked that probably a million times. So when I was being recruited, and for all the the young folks out there, back then you actually had mail that came to your house. You didn't have an internet, and like sometimes you maybe even had to go look up a college in the library because you didn't know anything about it. And I had a pile of, wow, oh my God, this is where I want to end up. And a pile of, well, I mean, if this pile doesn't work out, I've got a lot to fall on. And I've got a pile over here of, I don't know anything about and no interest. And honestly, WVU was over in the right-hand pile. Because, go back many, many times. The Flying W was only a couple years old. A couple of signature wins. The stadium was brand new. Coach Nehlen was really starting to turn the program around, but you didn't hear a lot about that. It was back then, similar to the Big Ten schools and the SEC and what Big 12 or actually was the Big 10. All right. What was it called back then? I can't even remember.
I would say the Big 8.
Big 8. There you go. Yeah. So, you get in these schools and a girl I went to high school with, her dad was a recruiter for WVU, and brought me down to a game, and check it all out. And fast forward into the game, and I'm like, oh my God, and afterwards went into the locker room and met Jeff Hostetler, and, some other folks, and, quick hit on meeting some of the coaches. And I was like, that goes from this pile all the way. It jumped, man. It jumped all the way over to the other pile. Like, this is a place I want to be, or would like to be. But, it's early on in the recruiting process. So fast forward to when you're allowed to do all the visits. And I had 5 or 6 visits scheduled, and WVU was my second visit. And when I went there for the official visit, and, really got to meet the coaching staff, really got a chance to look at the program and where Coach Nehlen was bringing it to. And then, Coach Jacobs was he was the position coach, but he was also the coach recruiting me. It was a no-brainer. There was a potential opportunity to play early. If you do things right, there was an opportunity to be a part of something really special in Morgantown. And I fell in love with that. I was actually I canceled 2 other trips, and I was canceling a trip to Notre Dame. Now, to put perspective on Notre Dame, when I received the letter from my dad, Irish Catholic, he was like Notre Dame through and through. It was like Rudy. He carried the letter in his coat pocket, right? And he's like, my son got a letter to Notre Dame, and he was as proud as can be. And my heart was set on WVU. I was canceling the trip to Notre Dame, and my dad was a little bummed out, although I didn't really realize it maybe at the time. But my high school football coach had actually played at Notre Dame, and he heard through the grapevine and whatnot that I was he called me up in the morning. He says, "What's going on?" I think I know WVU's where I want to go. He says, "You can't cancel. You got to go." And I'm like, Coach, I don't know what's going to change. And he says, it's my job to make sure that you don't say I coulda, I shoulda, or I woulda. And that advice like resonates with me when I talk to people now about, decisions and whatnot. Right. So I'm like, okay, Coach. Probably I was a little intimidated by him too. So I'm like, okay, Coach, yes, sir. If that's what you want me to do. But, made the trip. And it panned out exactly the way, I thought it would. But, I gave my all for the trip and whatnot, spent the time with the coaches and the players and all that. And when I came home, it was WVU, no questions. So wow. That was the kind of the storyline. Closer to home. It was, 2.5 tops from home. So my parents could come see me play, my family, my friends. And again, the stadium, the opportunity, everything it presented itself. It was all there.
See, and Kevin, thank you for explaining it just that way, because I think people lose perspective on what recruiting is now compared to what recruiting was back then.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's very important. And this is what I mean by being informative. Like, so when people see and they understand and they listen to this interview, what they're going to get from this is your coach was very similar to my coach. My coach, Frank Gargiulo, God bless him. He's a great man. He played at Notre Dame as well. So, we went through very similar, and that's such great advice for not just football, but it's great life advice.
Oh, yeah.
And this is where you picking West Virginia for all of the same reasons why I transferred to West Virginia and why when I first met you from day one, it's so interesting. There was something about you, and I've always told you this, that always resonated with me. You were always the same guy. You've always did what you were supposed to do. There was no glitz and glamour of doing anything outside of that, none of that other nonsense. And you never, I was so enamored with you as a person. And then I got to be enamored and honored to play with you on the field. See, that's what makes this special for me. Sure. You're the same guy that I played with all those years ago.
A lot older and gray.
Yeah, well, we all are. We all are. I don't have the box anymore. But what I love about it is that's the reason what makes you as special as you are, man. And I'm so glad that I wound up at West Virginia to play. It's an honor to have played with you. So you get there. Did you have any idea that we would wind up playing for a national championship and going undefeated and against Notre Dame?
Yeah, very ironic, huh? I really didn't know what it would bring, right? And again, for all the the young folks, now no matter what you do, you turn on a phone or a TV, radio, it's sports 24/7 on every channel. Back then it was like the news was at noon and they rarely talked about sports. The news was at 5 or 6 p.m. and they rarely talked about sports except towards the end of the week when sports were getting closer. So the thought of all that stuff really didn't necessarily resonate. I mean, Gene, heck, when I was in high school and playing football, it didn't dawn on me until like the end of my senior year of football that I might get somebody to pay for my college. It
Right.
just never, it didn't connect.
Right.
But I didn't worry about it. My dad taught me, take care of business and things will take care of themselves. So like or maybe I was just a goofball then, right? I was dumb. Everybody else was chasing down this scholarship. I was just like, I just want to play football, So now you get into this mode of you're at college and, our first year we were pretty good, redshirted, but I was, as a redshirt freshman, I traveled. And there was a risk for me to play because of where I positioned myself. And even towards almost the last game of the year, they was like, you might play. And then, calmer heads prevailed and said, no, because you would have blown your red shirt then.
Right.
So the next year, okay, let's set our sights on being a good team, being a good teammate, being a good player, and a couple of things worked out really well. And then we had a little, couple downtrodden, right? Years where we were learning about ourselves. We were trying to figure ourselves out. A little bit similar to, the Mountaineer team over the last couple of years, right? People coming in and coming out and how do you fit in? Well, so I thought we could always compete and win, right? In the spring, and Chris Parker, everybody knows Chris Parker because he was like the meanest son of a gun you put on a defensive line that he would knock your head off. And him and I were roommates, working together and good friends. And we weren't the official college roommates of the year into the summer and everything. And we're like, we're going to be good this year. It was him and I, and nobody knew this. And the story has leaked ever since then. But, him and I are like, we're going to be really good. You know what? Let's not cut our hair until we play for the national championship. Like, what? Yeah, let's not cut. Now, mullets were then in that. So we're not going to cut the back of our hair. And we weren't allowed to tell anybody. There was no talk about this. And so we made that pact because we thought we were going to be that good. As a matter of fact, we knew we were going to be that good, and we were that confident. So fast forward. It's mid-season. It's 6-7 months away. My dad had a flat top. Did some time in the Navy and all that. And it's hard to explain why you got this long curly hair coming out of your helmet, and I couldn't tell him why. And I'd be sitting at the tailgate, and he'd be flipping what's this? What do you got going on here? You got to cut this off? Nope, didn't happen. And obviously we made it to the national championship. We gave it one whale of a try. We were there. It was an incredible experience. I got my hair cut shortly after that and was able to actually tell my dad what was going on. But yeah, the storyline. So always thought we would be pretty good, but going into our senior year, when we looked at our backfield with you and AB and Craig and Reggie and Calvin and Grannis on the edge and Keith at tight end and the guys up front, And then on defense, I mean, just go around the horn, right? From Bo to Darryl to Willie and Lawrence and everybody, right? I mean, we had something very, very special. And the incredible thing about that special time is that it creates this special thing, right? So, when we saw each other a couple of years back, it's probably been, I mean, I don't know how many years since we see each other, but it's like boom, right? There's a little bit of the bro hug, then a big hug, and then my brother, and that happens with every single player that we participated with, and that's what makes, and I think it's bigger than most universities, but that's what makes a Mountaineer special. And then even when you go with players that aren't, that maybe they were a senior when we were freshmen, or even before us, there is always that. There's guys, I'm friends with guys that I've never even met that are Mountaineers, and we're like in a gang with Peloton. It's our Peloton gang. And there's some guys that I've never actually even met, but we're in this gang. We have this big text group message, and we challenge each other when we ride. And that's what brings you together. And I know kids at other at other schools. I don't know that I always see that connection that we have as Mountaineers. And we're still all fighting together for respect, for our friendships, and what's next for the Mountaineers, and certainly for all of us.
Kevin, and that's what I'm talking about, brother. And thank you once again for explaining it that way, because that's the God's honest truth. Like everything you just said, I echo the same sentiment. Once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer is not just a slogan.
Right.
It's not just a saying. It's not just a little cliche. But the key that again, looking at how hard you worked and how other offensive linemen worked, really gave me, AB, Andra, Craig, of course, Mage, like we knew how good we could be because we knew what we had up front. And that means more to a back than anything else. Sure. That's like on the basketball court, if you're a shooting guard, boy, you gonna really love your point guard. Okay. Sure. So, for you, to be this important job on the line, because you are like the CEO of the line. They have to listen to you, and you got to tell them, listen, we got to do this, we got to do this. Hey, it's on this count. How difficult was that early on in your career, and did it get easier as you got into your sophomore, junior, and senior year? I guess it did, but from your perspective, how difficult was that early in your career at WVU?
Sure. But it'd be people who are listening to this, and they're not going to buy it, but I'm going to say it was easy. And here's why. So my brother played college football, and I learned a lot from him about life and football and working hard and being committed. And the one thing he told me from jump when he was playing, show up in shape. So my freshman year, I showed up in shape, and every year after that, but my freshman year was going to be key, right? So I showed up in shape, probably I don't know if it's the best shape of my life, but certainly I showed up in shape. So on minute one of practice and skull sessions and all that, I was honing in, just listening to what the coach had to say. While I'm looking around, and quite honestly, even years after that, I still showed up in shape, but people are sucking wind. They weren't in that great shape, right? They weren't there. So I took the physical conditioning to the nth degree, kind of modeled some of the things that I learned from Mike Webster, right? The all-time, probably greatest center of all time in the NFL, in my opinion, and some of his training methods. right? So that was my mindset. And as soon as Coach Jacobs was drawing something or talking about it at practice, I was honed in. I was listening, absolutely listening. So it gave me the opportunity to learn. And you know, I'll say I was a good student. I probably could have been a lot better student if I really, really wanted to. I just didn't really want to, and shame on me. Boy, my kids hear this, but I was able to get by. I could go to class and just listen, take notes, and I could do well. I just didn't do that. But at football, I prepared myself mentally. I just watched, I listened, and then executed. Watched and listened. So it became kind of easy for me. And keep in mind that as that the third team center, I got to go to everything. So I got to hear everything. I got to see everything without repercussions of being the laser dot. Now, everybody's like, oh, the laser dot. What's the laser dot? Well, the laser dot means that's the coach who's got the laser dot pointing directly at you while he's telling you what you did wrong, sometimes what you did right, but absolutely pointing. So I didn't have any worry about ever being that dot. And I could just, again, listen and learn. And I was surrounded by these, all these fourth and fifth year seniors that were great players, great people. And I was able to learn from that. And then really it became easier. And it became even easier when John Stroya and Bobby Kovacs and Brian Schmider and Rick Phillips, and we all started meshing together. And, our junior year, as much as we maybe had to make some calls, there were times we didn't make calls because we just knew. You were able to look at it and you could feel it, you could sense it. And that's the beauty of the cohesiveness of teams. That's the beauty, or I should say, that was the beauty of cohesiveness. That was the beauty of, you're committed, you signed up, and you're going to be there, right? Not to get in any sort of, I don't like some of the things happening in college football today. That is what it is. You're not going to debate that. But when we looked at those guys, I knew John and Bobby and Brian and Chris and everybody on the other side. I knew we were all going to show up the next day, the next week, the next year, until our time was done. And I don't mean time being done in a negative sense, but until we were all graduating and moving on. And it was so absolutely incredible. And that commitment was just so strong. And it, again, still to this day.
That's important. No, I'm glad you touched on that because, Kev, that's exactly where I was going. I was going to segue, and beautiful segue. Thank you, my friend. Because that's exactly where I was going with that. What we had back then is not what I see altogether in the totality of what's happening right now. And I get it. People say my son is the corners coach at Sacred Heart University. So he and I talk about this stuff all the time. He's a chip off the old block. So it's old school for him. Even though he's a lot younger, it's just his mentality is older. So you're 100% right. When you don't see that, the camaraderie, the togetherness, you start to see the whole individual before you see the team. Yeah. And that's what tears this stuff apart. I've always and will always respect what we had because that's some serious brotherhood, man. Yeah. When I call you my mountaineer brother, I mean that. Like that's not something just slight of word. You know what I mean? It's just interesting to see. And I'm not sure, why do you think that's not pushed so much now the way it was pushed back then? And I know that's a crazy question. I know that.
You see that the cell phone. The cell phone is what. I mean, I love it. Don't get me wrong. I need it. I use it. But it also perpetuates lack of emotional connectivity. And it provides avenues for other people to connect, sometimes in a very negative manner, meaning like, fans are mad. So who do they attack? Players and coaches, which just bugs the heck out of me. And it probably, I know it was happening when we were playing, but it was once a week in a newspaper, maybe. right? But and now it's just constant. It's in perpetuity. So I think that breaks people at the core. It breaks people apart because, I back then I loved Eugene and there was nobody tearing us apart. Right now I love Eugene and we're teammates. And I'm saying nobody's tearing me apart, but all I hear is all negativity about Eugene, right? Or you hear all negativity about me, or we hear negativity about our coaches. So it fractures us, whether we want to admit it or not. It fractures us, and it fractures the team, and it fractures people's ability to cope. It fractures their mentality, meaning their mental strength. And we probably needed some mental health awareness when we were playing. We didn't know it. Now it's across sports, it's across work, it's across everywhere.
Right.
In my two of my kids still play in college, and my daughter has actually even created a mental health athletes mental health awareness club. If I got that wrong, she's not going to be happy, but the club at the school, and she's, they do interviews and they support teammates and they support athletes across all type things. And, imagine if we would have had that conversation back then, what? But it's needed. It probably was needed then, and it's needed now, but it's got to be needed, and not in the negativity of a stigma, not in the negativity of something's wrong. It's the anti-phone, right? It's the anti-social media. It's about connecting people because of people, and
Right.
not any other reason. And I think you lose some loyalty, intentionally, unintentionally, but you lose the ability to connect on that level that says, in 10 years from now, I'm going to see you walking down the street. I'm going to be like, hey, teammate guy, give me a hug. Now, then it'll be like, wait, let me do a facial recognition to see if that's who you really are. Right. And then I'll be like, no, I only played with that guy 1 year at that one college. And then at another year, I played with some other dude that kind of looked like him, but I don't know.
Right.
So I think that's what happens.
And I think that's awesome what your daughter's doing, man. That's really good stuff, because you're right. I think it is needed. There's a piece that the buzzword now around education, the social emotional. And I've been screaming that for the last, I'm a special education teacher, 25 years teaching experience, man. Been doing this for 25 years. And it's interesting because that's the buzz thing, social emotional, but it's so true. And it's more so needed now than ever before. So you're 100% right. So, man, kudos to your daughter for doing that, man. That's freaking awesome. And you're right. We probably could have used that even back then. Even back then. Although I like to think, what did you think of Coach Nehlen? Because I like to think I've leaned on his words more now over the last 15 years in counting than I did when I played for him.
Yeah.
It is such a freaking amazing thing. I tell him that every time I talk to him.
Yeah. Had absolute 100% respect for Coach as a leader, or a head coach, right? But then as a leader of people, and then also the business side that you really didn't know that he was kind of teaching us a little bit, right? About life. And so, like, if you think of on a scale of 1 to 10 and where I was when I was playing, all those things were, 9s and 10s on any given day or week, depending on what was going on, maybe. And then fast forward 10 or 15 years, those are probably like 10s, 11s, and 12s. And I know I said it was a scale of 1 to 10, but I got to go for the hyperbole here. So it was 10s, 11s, and 12s, but I didn't know it then. Right. It's like you're at a workplace and you're like thinking about, like, well, why is it kind of messy in here? Like, oh man, Coach Nehlen would have us, right. And then I had the absolute pleasure. So I was out in the business world for, I got to do this math, for 12-ish years. Yeah, 12 13 years and, stayed connected with coach and whatnot. And I asked him if he would come speak to my management team. And yeah, it's all good. And he flew out to I was in Colorado at that time, and he flew out to Colorado, and I had probably 35 people in the room. And, keep in mind, he had recently retired. Have he retired yet? Boy, I got to do the math in my head here. He might not even been retired yet, or maybe he was right on the cusp. And he's like, Hall of Fame type guy. He's all these wins, and he was coach, right? He was coach, and like people in the meeting are like, oh my God, this guy's like, D1, he's the real deal, coach of the year, couple national championship competitive teams, conference winners, ball game winners. And I'm like, that's coach, and he got up and he talked about how all of the things that you do in athletics, and it translates to clubs and other things that you may do, because not everybody plays athletics. But when you do all those right things right, connecting to your people, talking, holding people accountable, keeping things organized, stay on schedule, all of those things come together, and it translates into the business world. And like couple of my managers are like, oh, so now I see. Now I see, right? Yeah, so it evolved as I matured, but nothing but hats off and kudos to Coach Nehlen for what he did for me as a person, for me as an athlete, for me as a business person, what he did for our university, what he did for every kid that went through there. I still think the world of him. Saw him a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. Still rolling along.
Absolutely. Kev, man, definitely warms my heart, because you and I, many of us, the majority of us, I would say, if you had the pleasure to play for this man, I'm sure we all share the same sentiments about him. I got about another minute, so I'm going to ask you this. In closing, what advice would you give a young student athlete that's trying to find a university or a place to call his or her home?
Sure. First off, everybody thinks they know what they want to do. I'm not doing anything that I thought I was going to study, that I graduated in, and that I've been doing now for 34 years. So there is no answer just around the corner. The answer is about discovering yourself along the way, being open to different ideas, different thoughts, different inputs to help shape and form you. And just because there's a little barrier in that road, or I'm confused, or I don't know what to do, you got to turn it around. Like, okay, what did I learn from this? How do I get better? Because someday when we all grow up, and I don't know what the exact definition is, how old you are, or how long you've been out of school or whatnot. It's number one, the decision isn't right around the corner. So take your time. Number two, you got to stay focused on school. Student comes first for a reason. Athlete is awesome, and it's great to be a part of all those things. But at the end of the day, what you learn in school and what you take away will help you in the business world just as much as athletics. But unfortunately, athletics can take it away a lot faster. God forbid that you get hurt or injured and whatnot. And when you bank it all over here, you can lose it all over here very, very quickly. So it's about investing in your mind, investing in your heart and your soul about where you want to go. Stay committed to yourself. So when you look at the person in the mirror every day, right? At the end of the day, at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, the only person you're looking at is yourself, and say, did I do my best I could today on whatever it is? And if so, you can rest your head every night and sleep well.
Wow. Whew. Brother, I appreciate you, man. I really do.
I appreciate you too.
Thank you for jumping on this thing, and please give my very best regards to your wonderful family.
Thank you. Same on your end too.
Got you. And I will be in touch with you shortly.
Awesome. Sounds great. It's great seeing you. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the work you're doing, and all of your, podcasts. Is that what we call these podcasts?
Call them.
Okay. Encyclopedia casts from the old school. But it's all great, and I appreciate all you're doing for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, man. All right, Kev.
Take care,
Love you,
sir.
brother.
You
I'll
too.
talk to you
Back at you.
All right, take care. Boy. I can't say it enough. What a great guy. And I knew that interview was going to be special for many reasons. Kevin has so many things going on that's been so productive and so positive over heard. You can see why we're all pretty much cut from the same cloth. When you're blessed to play for Don Nehlen and that camaraderie, as he spoke on, and the love and admiration we have for each other as a team and teammates, that stands the test of time. So that's why I'm so proud to be part of that West Virginia Mountaineer family over all these years. So I thank God that I played with Kevin Koken and other players like him. So just it warms my heart to even speak like that. So once again, it was great to have him on, and now you understand why Mountaineer Nation, you understand why we revere and love each other so much. It's that camaraderie that we have, that brotherhood. That's what being a Mountaineer is all about. So I look forward to seeing you next week with another surprise guest. You take care. I'm Eugene Napoleon. This is Relatively Sports with moi. I'll see you next week.